question I usually ask is just what your family's approach to food was, what you learned about food as like either a tool of celebration or of coming together, or possibly not. But how does your family approach food, and how do you think that has informed how you now think about either your life or in the lives of those people that you serve?
That's a good question to start out. I think my family really revolves around food. Well, we always had dinner. So like every single night we would always have dinner at the table. Both my parents are still together, and we still, whenever we go home, we still have dinner. My mom sometimes cooks it, but that was always a thing. And then we'd always have like a sweet, like we would never have dinner and no dessert, whether it was like, something store-bought or ice cream or whatever that was. Like we always have some sort of dessert. I've always had a sweet tooth, so I think I always kind of look forward to that dessert.
Where did you grow up?
From Wisconsin. So we were in a suburb outside Milwaukee, but it was Milwaukee. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it seems like it, so I'm presuming, but you do seem to have like a connection to Wisconsin. Can you talk a little bit about like your affection for that place?
Yeah, I think definitely an affection for it. It's funny how life kind of like comes in full circle, and that's happened to me a couple times, I think, with art, going to art school and then kind of forgetting about that and it coming back to me when later in my culinary career. The same thing I think has happened with, I don't know what you call it. Yeah, naturalist behaviors or just feeling a connection with the land. I think obviously food kind of touches with that, but I think being from Wisconsin, I would go to summer camp every single summer, and that's, at least a month. And the summer camps in Wisconsin, you would go on these canoe trips for weeks, and you're like 10, 11, 12, or young teenagers. You're really impressionable. And you would just be you and a bunch of other girls and canoeing in the middle of nowhere. No, you're going to the bathroom in holes and you're eating stuff that you brought with us. You were like portaging canoes on our shoulders. And I think as a young person, that's really impressionable. But that's just how I grew up. So yeah, I think especially the last couple years, I think I've just kind of been, I don't know what the word, maybe nurturing that and just realizing that's really something I truly love, and how special that is to be able to be exposed to that. And I hope everybody can experience what I've experienced. Yeah, you go up north or up to the UP or the Upper Peninsula, and you get no cell phone reception. You see forests that are so vast, and you just kind of feel very close, and it's a very special place. Yeah. So I hope everybody in the world can see what I see up there and experience that at some point.
It sounds extremely formative, like spending large amounts of time in nature. I mean, also away from family.
I was just by myself. It took me a long time to blossom, I guess. And so like, I didn't want to leave home until I was going to college. So that was really hard for me, but I think it's good. I'm a very like introverted person naturally. So it definitely shaped me. Yeah.
What did you find yourself gravitating to specifically as far as activities or things that were offered at summer camp? Like what things did you feel like your more childlike self was like immediately drawn to, and what stuff did you have to like grow into?
I immediately anything art related. I've always been like that. So, and I think my art teachers throughout school have always realized that. Camp was a little more difficult because they wouldn't let me just be in the art room for the entire month. So I think things that pushed me were being around other people, like the swim tests and everything. But yeah, always art. And that's kind of stuck with me through high school. I just was always the art kid. So I kind of took as many art classes as I could and put off math and science for a long time.
What mediums did you find were like easiest for you to express?
I think always drawing, painting. Those are my two main mediums. So that's what I studied. I went to art school.
Where did you go?
Yeah, I went to MyEd in Milwaukee. Yeah, I looked all over. We went to RISD. I got into school at the Art Institute of Chicago. I looked at MCAD in Minneapolis, but MyEd gave me like pretty, almost like a full ride. So I ended up staying in Milwaukee. So that was nice.
So going to a place and exclusively doing art, I feel like it could either be like a kid in a candy store, or it could put strain on something that you did love, but now that it's like the sole focus, could possibly drain some of the enjoyment out of it. What was your experience with solely focusing on art?
I had a great experience. I think the school I went to was a good choice for me. I looked at RISD, and I also looked at Baltimore, and they were more conceptual, where you're more thinking outside the box and about not necessarily the piece in front of you, but what that piece means. And my school was a little bit more classical in training, and I actually really appreciated that. I think my experience at least was like, wow, there are people who think like I do. One of our first drawing classes was like, you go out to the park and you are staring at trees for like 2 hours and drawing the trees. It felt really, really comforting to know that there were other people like me who think like that, like, oh, I'm going to go look at the sky for an hour and it's not weird. And for me, it was really comforting.
It's a particular skill to see something in your mind or to see something in the world and then be able to create it to a level that feels like, oh, I drew that tree that I just saw. When you think of your art, are you excited to replicate what you see, or do you find that there is like a level of interpretation that goes on?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually funny you say that, because that's something like recently I've been dealing with. I don't know. I wonder if I put more effort into my art as an adult, if I would feel a little bit more at ease with it. But I'm currently kind of questioning, I'm currently like developing my skills enough where I can like replicate something. And I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of at this weird turning point where now I want to explore like, yeah, like what you see, but your version of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for the last however many years I've been painting, I've just struggled with just replicating what I see. And now I'm kind of, I don't know if it's just getting older or you just get to a certain point in your art where you're now, maybe I don't have to worry about that so much, because everybody can replicate what they see to a certain point if you go to art school or if you study for a long enough period of time. So now maybe I just focus somehow on my interpretation of that. That's hard. I think that's the hard part about art, kind of what drew me to food too. It's kind of that challenge to capture something that's just within you and something that you could be working on your whole life.
Mm-hmm. What has been your experience with the feeling of vulnerability when you are sharing your art?
I don't know. I mean, from a young age, my mom would have to get my stuff out of the trash, whether it's like a painting or drawing or like an award for something, because you just never feel, it never feels like good enough, or it never feels like exactly what you were trying to get out. And I still feel like that. And my mom to this day thinks I'm going to stop doing food to do art. And I'm like, I just don't think I have it in me. It's so hard to want to put yourself out there in that way. You feel extremely vulnerable. And personally, I just feel like it's never good enough. But it's also, that's the draw to art. That's what keeps you coming back, is that you have this idea and you feel the need to express it. But yeah, I don't think I've maybe done like one painting that I'm really happy with in my whole life. And most of the time I'm just like staring at a blank canvas, or I have like 20 paintings that I've started and never finished. It's hard. I think food is a little bit, this does go well together. So this is delicious to a certain point, but art is it's just so much, it's so different. It's like, it's the eye of the beholder, and really, that's really scary, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. I empathize with that a lot. So that parallel to food is interesting, because it sounds like there is maybe more controllable factors, or like maybe things that are a bit more objective in food. When did you start to see that, like, oh, I have like a little more control in food over the results than I do with painting or drawing?
Yeah, I think that's control is a lot easier with food. So, obviously I'm still learning a lot, and every year you grow a lot. You look back on your desserts or plates and you think of them differently. But, texture is an important thing. How people eat something is very important. And so if you have a tart, let's say, and you fill a tart with cream and then you serve that as a dessert, someone's going to have a very hard time cracking into that tart shell. So it's like, how can I create that same flavor profile or texture without it being difficult to eat? So I think texture is an important thing for David too. I think we don't want to give you a plate where it's like the main concern is like, how am I going to put this in my mouth? Because you don't want to worry about that. So that's something that I don't feel like is very objective. I think if it's easy to eat, it's easy to eat. And I think, like chocolate and caramel goes well together. So maybe I won't change that too much, but how can I add something that makes you think a little bit more, or is something that you have never tried? Or yeah, I guess that's my approach to food, really.
Yeah. Well, when did you first cross that threshold where you had that leeway to be like, oh, I can start integrating interpretation or something of my personal desire in the experience of eating this?
Like when did I kind of get creative freedom, sort of?
Yeah, like what was the position or the establishment where you were able to then start doing that more?
I think I got so lucky so I was hired at the Publican about a year after they opened by Brian Houston and Paul. So Brian was a chef de cuisine, and I just taken over from there. I think she was like the original pastry chef, or she had taken over by someone who like fell through. Anyway, it was like very young in the Publican after they opened. And their whole thing was just being letting their cooks just put things on the menu and be very creative. And Brian was just really supported all the creative minds that worked there. And we had such a stellar team. It was just an amazing crew back then. Like one person went on to be the chef de cuisine of WD50, and the cooks that were there just taught me everything. So I'd worked savory there for about a year and a half before I became the pastry chef, which is another thing I really appreciated. Brian and the other cooks were willing to take me on with zero savory experience and teach me everything. So, which I'm really grateful for. I think learning savory was really put me out of my comfort zone, but was really, really beneficial as a pastry chef later on. But yeah, like from the get-go, they were like, just make it delicious and make it fit the Publican. But they kind of just let me do my thing. So, which is terrifying. And it's like, you have no idea if you're going to be good. I had maybe like a year and a half pastry experience under my belt, which most cooks work for years and years before they get that sort of position.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, looking back on it, my desserts were so bad, but people really liked them, I guess. But, I was like, the person I took over for had slices of pie and a crumble and some whipped cream, which were great. She was wonderful, but I really wanted to like show my creativity. So I remember I had like some like kind of like a deconstructed tart, speaking of tarts, but it was like pumpkin and some sort of weird marshmallow fluff and pepitas and balsamic or saba or something like that. And like back then it was like, I just felt like it was so crazy. And it was like cozy. I tried to make like cozy Publican food, but yeah, it was just like, it was maybe like a little too intricate for the Publican. So, but he let me do it. And it taught me so much. You like learn from yourself. And I would read books and go online and look at other pastry chefs and just, from my mistakes, learn so much. And that's how it has been since then. I've just learned from my mistakes, and which I think can be huge. But yeah, I was very lucky. I don't know many people who get that chance to just become a pastry chef and take over a team like that and just have the support from their peers like that.
Yeah. How do you know when you're making a mistake if you're like at the top? What are you growing into that then you're comparing the old stuff to? Like, what are your desires or your goals for what the experience of an Anna Posey dessert is that those were not quite there yet?
I mean, there's a lot of things. I feel like every menu that I've ever done has to be better than the next menu. So if I'm putting on a chocolate dessert, some of my desserts I would say have like a different title, not title, but I'll have a chocolate dessert, I'll have a fruit dessert, I'll have maybe like a vegan or dairy-free dessert. So you kind of get a dessert menu that's all over the board or covers everything. But yeah, if it's not better than what I've already done, then it's not gonna go on that menu. But when I was learning, oh my God, I distinctly remember like you pick up things that you're like, okay, I'll never do that again. Like I made in my head, I was like, oh, this is gonna be so good. It was like a layered chocolate ice cream terrine thing with like this is at Publican pudding and crunchies, and I was gonna like slice into it and have this beautiful like striped terrine with all
Mhm.
these different flavors and textures. And I was so sure that it was going to be delicious that I just made like four huge like Pullman loaf pans. So I filled them all. It was like days worth of work. And I I like unfreeze it, and the whole thing, like the ice cream was so hard, the pudding like squishes everywhere. Everything just like it just immediately I was like, well, this is fucking garbage. And you just like cry and you're like, what did I do? You feel so stupid. So I never did that again from now on. From then on, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to do like a small batch of something. But I mean, things like that are obvious, like, well, this was a failure. And I feel bad for them, but it was on their dime, and it's like now it's on my dime. So I'm even more
Mhm.
cautious about making sure that it sounds good and also testing very small. But I think number one is that, well, one, I want David to like it because he's very critical of desserts. So if it passes David's critique, then that's good. And then personally, it just has to be better than the last one. And
Mhm.
it sounds very intense, I guess, to say that out loud. How do you just keep being better and better? But I think your flavors, your likes change, your what you look for changes. You get sick of flavors. Like if I use malt too much, I get sick of malt, so I'll go on to something else. And yeah, kind of it's hard but fun. Yeah.
With that concept of being better and better, because it's so subjective and kind of like hard to hold, what do you inject like an ingredient or a technique that kind of puts you on that edge of like, oh, I've yet to master this or use it very often, or I've never seen this before? Is that how you kind of stoke freshness? Are you looking for newness?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's always hard because it kind of sometimes feels like everything's always been done. But I think fruit season is like right now, summer and spring and early fall are the best because, every year that it's rhubarb season or when it's rhubarb season every spring, you get so excited because you're like, okay, how can I use rhubarb this year that's different than last year or better? So I think like if it's an ingredient, you want to kind of, yeah, like master that ingredient, and every season is a little bit different.
Mm.
And winter is a different challenge where it's to be better. I guess it's kind of the same thing, but you work with less variety. So it's like, okay, parsnips, like how can I make those cool this year? But it's something different than I did before. So yeah, I think it's almost like making it better, but also making it different than you've done. I think David and I are both like that because of Paul Kahn, because he just pushed us so hard to do something, change your menu every week, every month, do something you haven't done. So we're very grateful that he kind of instilled that in us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
I feel fine about it.
Okay.
You've got this concept of like newness. What's the role of finding something that is like a home run and like a staple, or like do you have that desire to have either, I guess, anything be like, oh, well, this at least shows exactly, like I can just rely on it as like, this is Elske dessert, or this is animal.
Yeah,
Do you get to that point, or do you like the change?
that's been new for both of us. I think it's like we're starting to appreciate also that people come back for one thing. So on our menu, we do have a couple things that will never change, like the duck liver tart. So we're like, that's like, yeah, that's like the Elska tart.
Mhm.
What's that?
That's like typified of the Elske experience. Like that tart.
Yeah, yeah. So like the tart never changes. The smoked tea that we have on was something that David and I really wanted before we opened. It's kind of like based on this trip that we took. And it takes all the not scraps, but yeah, I guess like the discarded like vegetable peels and fruit trimmings,
Mm-hmm.
and we smoke those over the hearth. and then create this like it's really savory. Like you'd think there was like beef or something in it, but it's completely vegan. It's just like a tea from the smoked scraps. But it just kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of special to kind of welcome you into the restaurant, and it has every bit of every dish in that one tea. So that'll always stay on. And then my sunflower seed parfait, which is like, yeah, it's just become like the one dessert that I'll probably always keep on. So we're comfortable with that now. It's just, I think we want to change them, but we're kind of forcing ourselves to like have some sort of like classic, I guess, thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like in the last 10 years, Chicago's like competitiveness for like new whole restaurants and new concepts was just like, it was like boom, 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 like super specific, hyper specific restaurants where you're like, what? Like you're going to do a whole restaurant like dedicated to that? And so there is some level of like familiarity with certain, like when I just think of Lula, it's like, if they ever changed this one thing, it'd be like, it'd just be like heartbreaking. But I love this area. They're constantly innovating and bringing out newness. Was the staples that are now kind of coming into Elske, are those because of your experience with seeing guests enjoy it? Or is it you as like chefs saying like, we like these so much that we want to keep them?
I think it's like for the parfait, which is like a semi-Fredo with bee pollen and honey. That was like the servers, every single table that got it was like, holy shit, this is the best dessert I've ever had. Or like really loved the flavor combination to the point where it was noticeable that servers were selling it, people were coming in for it specifically just for that. So that's kind of like, okay, maybe I keep this on. Yeah, so that's like, I would say for the duck liver tart too. I think the tea is more like a selfish, we just really like this tea, so we're going to keep that on sort of thing. Like, I don't know if people would cry if that was gone, but I hope they would. But that's more just like, I guess, ego driven, where we just really enjoy this dish, and it really, to David and I, really speaks of Elska. But I think that, is that your puppy?
Yeah, he's barking at skateboarders. He doesn't like skateboarders.
F those skateboarders.
And luggage. He doesn't like rolling luggage. So.
Really? Oh, he'd hate my big bike. Yeah, Bazooka just looks out our window and just barks at everybody. So
he's
okay.
An opportunity barker.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think the parfait and the duck liver tart are like, people like those enough where we would keep those on forever.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back a little bit to college, to studying art, and then deciding to go into food. Did you try and go right into art after school?
You know what? I didn't really try that hard. I feel like which is kind of weird looking back on it. I think after art school, at least at my art school, they kind of like train you to expect that you're just going to get a job as in art. Like, it'll be super easy. You're amazing. You're just going to find a job really fast. So I think I applied to like probably 5-6 places max, and kind of like all over the board, and in Milwaukee, and I didn't get anything. And I was like, I don't really know what I want to do, because I was kind of just like all over. Like, it's like after art school, you know, what are you going to do? So it's like, well, do I go get my master's? Do I go work for a design firm? Do I just work as like a random like house painter? Like, I just like couldn't figure out like what I wanted to do. So I actually did a year of AmeriCorps, because I think I've, you know, maybe it's that Wisconsin upbringing, but I just always like really enjoyed being outdoors and being hands-on. So I applied all over. I almost got a job on like an urban farm, which is funny looking back on it, how that would have come full circle. But I went out to Delaware and worked for the state parks there. And so I did that for a year, which led me to Philadelphia. And I kind of was like back in that whole like, okay, now I got to really figure out what I'm going to do. So I had like an internship with it was like sort of interior design firm. And I was basically like staging apartments and houses, and not getting paid and just kind of hating it. And as internships are like, and yeah, I was just kind of like stuck. I was in kind of a shitty relationship, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and I want to get out of here. And so I was going to secretly apply to, it was some kind of crappy art school in Philadelphia that had a culinary program. And it was how I got there. I just kind of, I mean, it's corny, but I really had like, okay, what do I really like doing besides art? What can I see myself doing for the rest of my life? Because I need to figure my shit out. Because I don't know if I want to go back to school, and I need to figure this out now. So yes, I was like, well, the one thing I've been doing since I was little and I always have loved to do is baking. And it really, you know, it was popular back then, but it wasn't like crazy popular. Like it had some celebrity chefs, but it didn't feel like what it did this last decade. So I was kind of like embarrassed. I didn't want to like tell my parents like, hey, I'm going to go to culinary school. And I eventually told my parents, and my dad was like, well, you're going to go to a good school, or you're not going to go to some shithole in Philadelphia. So broke up with that guy and then moved all my stuff in Bazooka back to the Midwest.
Bazooka was already there.
Oh yeah, I got Bazooka in art school. He was like my little, yeah, I don't know. I'm always wanted a dog, and I think I was just in the right place to get one. Probably not financially, but mentally, I was just like, I need a little buddy. So Bazooka's been mine since he was little. Yeah, he's 13 now, but
what a guy.
Loves David more than me. So whatever. Little jerk. So yeah, Bazooka and myself and my dad, we all shipped me back to the Midwest and drove cross country in my little Volkswagen. And yeah, I went to French pastry school here. And then, I did an internship in Philadelphia too, at this restaurant that was like, oh my God, I'd be scared to go in there today as with my experience now. And like, I think it was kind of like, I didn't know any better. So I did it, but it was crazy. It was like this, have you heard of Lebec Fin or Lebec Fun? It's they closed up. It was like this very, very old school French restaurant in Philly with like the cliche little French man smoking a cigar and yelling at everybody. And so that was my first experience. And like I was like, I love this. This is great. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And yeah, and then I moved back to Chicago, went to French pastry school, met David at Blackbird when I was interning there. And the rest is history.
There you are.
Yeah, here I am.
Okay. So you come back to Chicago. You had a French pastry school. You go to Blackbird.
Yeah. So after school, I went to Blackbird. So I actually I feel like my entire life I've just been like, not airheaded is the right word, but just aloof a little bit. I just kind of my personality. And so I always like go with the flow. I'm a hard worker and I try to be really positive. And so I feel like that's kind of where I was at the end of school. I was like, oh, well, we'll see what happens now. It was kind of like art school too. It's like, oh, well, let's see what happens. But luckily for me, I had this friend, Caitlin, who was like just had an idea of what she wanted to do and where she wanted to be. And she was like, Anna, we need to be in the best kitchen in Chicago. And she was like, we just need to get an internship. And I was like, oh, well, we don't really need an internship. She's like, I know, but that'll be the best place for us right now. So she was my best friend in school. And I was like, well, yeah, let's do it. So she actually was like, okay, let's email Blackbird. So we both emailed Blackbird for pastry internships and we both got in. Back then it was a little bit easier to find, I think, jobs where you were looking. People were just always hiring. But it was an intense kitchen. But yeah, we got in. The pastry chef back then was Patrick Fahey, and David had just taken over chef de cuisine position. And Caitlin worked like AM and I worked PM, or we'd switch off. And then the pastry kitchen's on the second floor, excuse me. And the kitchen was so small that Patrick was like, there's not really a lot of space for you guys, so I might split you up and put you at Publican. Yeah. And then when my internship ended, Blackbird didn't have a position and Publican did, but it was savory. So I really liked Blackbird because it was challenging, but Publican was like this whole other, people were like your family. And I know people have kind of been looking down upon that now, but it really did feel like that at that time. It was like these guys who were like older than me, these women who were so tough kind of took me under their wing and taught me just anything that they knew they would give me. And it was super challenging, but it just felt awesome. And it felt like I had found my place in this career or in this world of food. So yeah, so when Brian asked me at the Publican asked me if I wanted to be a savory cook, I was like, I mean, I got to think about this. Like, I was like, I don't know. I barely know if I'm like ready for food, like a career in food. To work savory was just like, oh my God, I've never even thought about that. Like, I thought I would be at the Ritz-Carlton, like decorating cakes and like not getting like chopping up onions. But I don't know. I at that time it was a really, really hard decision. I remember really laboring over my answer. And in the end, I was like, well, I'm not going to get this opportunity any other place. And if I want to learn savory, this is my chance. And so I said yes. And he started me off on the oyster station, which you're just shucking oysters for the entire night. It was crazy. You felt cool though, because you're like, it's an open kitchen and you're like jabbing this knife into your hand basically. But I also had to make staff meal for the entire crew, which was like 30 people. So I didn't know how to make anything. I barely knew how to make a nice cake. I'm just fresh out of school. So that taught me so much. To make staff meal was just like, to this day, like I'll never forget, one of the other cooks was like, if you can make staff meal, a good staff meal, you can cook anything. He was like, just season it well, no matter what it is, just make it taste delicious and people will like it. So it could be, some weird stew where you throw everything in a pot and hope that it comes together. But if you season it well and cook it properly, like it'll be good. And yeah, I still do. And I think David does this too. You kind of judge people based on how they cook at home and how they would make staff meal. Cause I think that is real cooking. So yeah, that taught me everything. And I worked my way up the stations. And by the end, I was like the only girl working at Publican, and I was in charge of grill, which is like, I just had this huge fire and I've got all the ribeyes and chickens and I'm just like mastering this. I'm like basically like on like a step stool, just like mastering this grill. And that was like a huge boost of confidence for me. I think that's what I really needed. I've always been kind of timid, no matter what I'm going to do with my life. Like if I can, it sounds stupid now, but like if I can master this grill, I can do anything. So yeah, it was really an important part of my career, I guess.
With that experience, so knowing that you could do something at scale that's like maybe very big and there's just a lot of pieces to fit together, how did Elske become a balance of those two things? What did you leave those two restaurants thinking like, if I can choose, what kind of factors were you like, I like this from here and I like this from there? And what things were you like, I for sure don't want to like do this or create an environment that's like this?
Oh, that's a good question too. There are a lot of things, and I wouldn't say it was just Publican or Blackbird. It was my time at Everest. It was.
Oh, you were at Everest too.
David. I was at Everest too, where I worked under a pastry chef who was just terrible to me. And I was like, I'm never going to be like that. And it was like traveling. I think David and I, since we've been together, have traveled all over the world. And we're very fortunate to have been able to do that. But there's a restaurant in Belgium that's since closed, but it was called In de Wolf. And it felt like it was middle of nowhere. And you go in and there's all wood tables. I don't know if they had a Michelin star. I can't remember, but it was just like, it was very refined, but very comfortable. And there was like a huge fire and there was stuff hanging and drying. And you walk in and you have a whole table to yourself, which is like so extravagant, but it never felt stuffy. And then the cooks run all the food to the tables, or they used to. And so the whole time you're engaged with these cooks which we really connected with, obviously. So it's like we took that from In de Wolf. So our cooks from day one, it was a little bit harder because there were labor laws. So we met with our labor lawyer and we're like, how can we make this work in Chicago? And it turns out if cooks run food, a certain percentage of the time you can legally tip them. So that kind of solved how we can give our cooks more of a livable wage as well, which was another thing that was really important. It's like, okay, if we're going to run this business, we want to do it right. So we weren't able to afford it at first, but for the last, I would say 3 years, we've been able to give our staff health insurance. We've been able to tip them. We've given week's vacation, or we've just like closed up the shop because we're like, people need to be with their family or do whatever. So there are certain things that we've taken, I would say, whether it's eating out at different restaurants or from the places we've worked, there were certain things that we were like, we want this, we don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Cotton definitely influenced us a ton, and we're very grateful for everything he gave us. I think even just being open, like from year 1 of Elske until year 4, which we're in right now, we've learned so much, and we've changed a lot, and our staff that we have changes us too. So I think the quarantine, we had a staff that really like taught us so much about like what they want from us as managers. And I think this past year especially has been really a huge period of growth for both of us. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's difficult. I think the easiest questions to answer when we first opened were like, how are we going to have service? How are we going to present food? What plates are we going to use? Those seem easy compared to like managing, and that'll be, I think every team that we get on, all the people we hire are going to bring something.
I mean, managing people is just, it's so much non-visible work. It's so much emotional support. It's so much listening. It's so much conversation in the midst of an industry that's already intense. If everything was perfect, just the execution of it can be really intense. So was there anybody that you experienced that leadership from, to you or towards you, that felt like, oh, this is like revolutionary in terms of like how you can treat somebody that's below you?
I keep thinking about like the chefs that I've had that I don't want to be like, but
That's also fair. Because like I think so much learning is from like knowing what we don't want.
I've had multiple chefs who I'm like, I know what I don't like about how you're managing me. And it didn't necessarily have to be like yelling or screaming, but it could be like downplaying somebody's talents before they know that they have them, or not pushing somebody in a positive way. I think one person who I tell him, and he like is so like embarrassed that I tell him this, but Brian Houston, like the fact that he just, he gave somebody like me just a chance because he enjoyed how we worked together and how my approach was just in a kitchen. He didn't know how I cooked. I think that's really amazing that he could just have faith in somebody to do a good job and trust somebody like that. And I think David and I try to really trust our staff and give people who don't have a lot of experience jobs that maybe we think that they can handle. And it's, it doesn't always work out.
Right.
I think one lesson that we've learned is that you can't trust everybody opening our own business. I think it's still something that we want to keep giving, because for both David and I, we were both given that chance. So as very young cooks. So I think that's something that we want to, if it's a person that we can trust, we want to give them responsibility and want to see them grow. We have a sous chef, Taylor, who's been with David since Blackbird, and seeing her grow so much. And we're just so excited for like one day when she opens her own spot. We hope we can support her.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be the same as Paul supporting us and Brian supporting me. And yeah, it's cool to have those people on our staff that we just like have that relationship with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that experience of seeing somebody happy to usher you on or to like send you off, it's not a given.
No.
People are either upset that you're moving on or try and make the conditions so that it's hard for you to move on.
They're usually mad. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, do you know what you just did to my whole team? And like, as now the owner of the restaurant, it can't be, it's not nothing when somebody leaves, but at the same time, you're like, it's a conscious choice. I think I don't want to intrinsically say it's a mature thing, but it's, to me, feels like you're operating at a higher hope for the kind of person that you will become or they will be, to like celebrate when somebody moves on. So as you see talent at your restaurant move on or have other aspirations, How do you and David work together, support each other to take the hit when somebody says, I'm going to go open my new place? Or has that happened yet even?
It's like when people leave, because we're such a small restaurant, it is like a little heartbreaking. Like it's kind of like you're getting broken up with a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very grateful that it's both David and I taking that hit together, because it's kind of, you still have that support. You have that person who will always be there. David and I will always be there for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish everybody had that in a restaurant, because there are so many times where you do take a hit like that, and it is heartbreaking. So it's like, at least you can come together and you have each other, and you grow, you get a little bit stronger. And I love our old GM, and we miss him, but we have an amazing GM now. And now it's like, I can't imagine this restaurant without her. And so it's like, you keep growing. It's like you get a little scab and it turns into a scar, and then as you just go to another level. But yeah, we've had some hard departures from some people, and we don't wish anybody, you never want to wish anybody ill will, and you just hope that they find what they're looking for, and we hope that we find what we're looking for. And yeah, it's definitely a decision. Like you have to bite your tongue a little bit and just be like, it's going to suck for me, but in the end it'll be better. Especially, unfortunately, we've had to let people go, and that sucks, and it's like, it's never good, but in the end it's better for the team. And that's a huge decision we have to make sometimes, unfortunately.
I just wonder what will rise to the top as far as environments that workers are looking for. As like operators, like, are you able to connect with the broader industry of like, we want to create an environment that's similar to that, or like we can help people out in like being a part of whatever change is going to happen?
Yeah, I think this whole time, I'm sure, has been eye-opening for everybody. We have friends with other restaurants all over the country, and they're doing different things than what we're doing. It's been really hard, truthfully. And the stress that people don't see, or like what goes on behind the scenes. We've learned a lot, and I still think we're trying to figure out where we want to be. But like Bang Bang Pie is doing an awesome job. Lula always does an amazing job handling things with their staff. And David and I are more, I guess, like, we are kind of behind the scenes. Like we don't always vocalize all these things that we do, whether it be donating throughout the years or charities or the tipping, for example. We're not very vocal about these things that we feel strongly about personally that we want to do as business owners. And I think everything that's happened in the last half year has been eye-opening for us. Is maybe we do need to be more, whether it's vocal about how we handle situations or communicate more with our team. Our team has brought that to our attention. It's like, we think we are being vocal enough, or like communicating enough. And I think during times like this, people want complete transparency. David and I have always been a little bit more hands-off. People want to be a part of the restaurant more. I think David and I have always seen it as like, we're family, but we reserve a lot of things that we just put the stress on our shoulders. And our team now is like, give us a little bit of that. There's definitely like a balance for the future. We want to be just a little more engaged with our staff. And yeah, it's just been a learning experience.
I think it is a wise thing to say like, well, what does my staff want? And like, be like, this is where I can affect change, and these are my people.
I think I think social media has been really great to bring everybody together, but it also cannot be the only way that you judge people. I also think there's some restaurant owners who should be shut down because they're not treating their employees well. Anything you put out as a business owner, especially in these days, is like, it's there forever. So it's like, we always really want everything we do to be well crafted, whether it's like going to a labor lawyer before opening, and we just want everything to be as perfect as we possibly can get it. So, because when you put yourself out there, you're immediately judged. That's been one thing from the get-go. It's like, we just want to try to do everything right for everybody. So yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot of bumps along the way, and we've already had some, but yeah, so far, knock on wood, it's going okay.
Well, we're coming into the end of our time. What have you reconnected to, and how was daily life going before all of this that you're like, well, I probably won't go back to 100% of what that was. I now remember or am doing this thing that I want to make sure I integrate as we move forward.
I wonder if other people feel like this, but it's like, man, I just work too much. Like I just like need to, and it was something I was already kind of getting towards, but we both just work way too much. And it's like, how do you, when it's a restaurant and it's yours, like we're trying to figure out how we can kind of like step back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So far it hasn't been really possible, but it's like, oh my God, like it's just too much. And I think anyone who works in a restaurant probably feels that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I've definitely been like getting back to nature. Like, I feel like I've been going on like, so I'm like obsessed with mushrooms now. Like, I just like can't stop.
I mean, you just make mushrooms on your Instagram look like magical.
There's something about going out and like, it's like finding buried treasure. I just like, I love it. And I've just been so much more in touch with being in nature, and it's something I love. And you kind of realize, this is so corny, but life is really short, and I love the restaurant, and I'm so happy we're doing it. But I think we also need to find kind of that work-life balance more. And I'm sure that's every single person who is either unemployed or whatever it is. I'm sure maybe some people are dying to go back to work. I don't know, but I'm just kind of, I think Elske, or how we are with Elske, will be a little bit different in the future. And we're only open 4 days a week now, which already feels great compared to what it used to be. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. But I think our idea of like opening another restaurant, we wanted to have like a dive bar. For now, that's like so on the back burner. We're just like, no, it's not something we want. Like I'm so happy we only have one restaurant in a city that has like, everybody has like multiple restaurants. And we were just like, yeah, maybe we'll open like a cool dive bar and kind of like wine bar meets some really shitty hole in the wall. And we're just like so over that idea. So both Dave and I have just been like outside and kind of engaging those things that we've been wanting to do for so long that just never had time to do. So yeah, I'm mushrooming. I don't know.
I mean, to find something that like scratches that itch that's so personal. I would do this if nobody watched, like, it's just like, that's really fulfilling.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm such a mushroom nerd now. I have like I have like a pack basket. So I have this huge like basket that's on my back, and I'm like throwing mushrooms, and it's just like
nice.
Ridiculous. Yeah. I've got like my big bucket hat. Yeah. Looks cool. Anyway.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm happy to meet you.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much for wanting to do this.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time.
Right. Yeah. I'll see you Friday.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye.